get is y'all don't know anything about racing. This is true. You're right. You're in the wrong show.
Yeah.
You're watching the wrong show if you want to hear like super engineer stuff.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Hitting the Apex. Joined by Evan. Evan, how's it going?
Rough, rough weekend. Let's say we could just start by saying that.
Yeah, did not go well for our boys. We'll obviously get into that. Reliability continues to be an issue kind of across the grid. So we'll see. We'll definitely talk about that as well. Morgan, way early this morning, wants to apologize to Alpine. And then Carly just joined us live. Shout out to Carly.
Nice.
So got our usual crew filtering. And speaking of Morgan, he did give us a prediction last week, as did the both of us. So we both had Russell, Hamilton, Antonelli as the order of finish, and that ended up not being correct. Right, 3 drivers for the podium, wrong order. And then you did nail your surprise pick, which was Hadjar ahead of Max. And then
Off of a
Morgan had no. I mean, I think he was running ahead anyway, or was he not?
Yeah, he was.
I mean, so there's that. I had double Red Bull DNF, but Hadjar spun for me and tried to tease me. He spun out, but he did not. He got back going and actually finished to the point. So he didn't pay me off the way I wanted. And then Morgan had Russell, Leclerc, Hamilton. So that wasn't right. But he did have a max DNF also. And so he gets paid off on that one. So that was the predictions from last week. Now I totally spaced and forgot to ask for the sprint winner. So normally the sprint race we have that prediction too. We did not make it. I think Carly's alluding to the fun weekend that Max had over for Red Bull. We'll talk about that as well. I guess let's start with the sprint race. So because the start of the normal race kind of merited to some extent. So for whatever reason, Evan, it feels like Ferrari can get off the line better than everyone else, significantly so, to the point that as long as they're in the first few rows, they basically end up in first into the first corner.
Yeah. I mean, even if they're a little bit further back, like I mean, look at Australia. I mean, it wasn't Hamilton. Didn't he start like 6 or something like that in Australia, and he was still able to kind of get his way all the way up there? Or Leclerc, one of them was starting, 3rd row or something like that, and he got all. They both got all
it was
the way
Leclerc.
up there.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so it's like those Ferraris, even the Ferrari powered cars. So even like somebody like Ollie Berman, he got a great start as well, and worked his way all the way up into the points, by the end of the race. But or even at the start of the sprint. So realistically, though, we know what is happening with those cars now. They've been talking about it for the past couple of weeks. It seems like both are the two big manufacturers of the engines. The Ferraris and the Mercedes went a little bit different ways. Ferrari's got a little bit smaller of a turbo that can spool up a little bit faster, while Mercedes has a little bit bigger of a turbo that maybe makes a little bit more power, or at least more consistent power. Uh, so that's where the advantage is. You see the Ferraris have great acceleration coming off corners, but you see the Mercedes have that top speed advantage. You see that in those long straights. And realistically, that's where that's how the battles should be playing out in this type of formula, with how these cars are set up, is that they should have advantages and disadvantages in different areas, which is interesting to see because at the end of a formula we see all these cars are so even. And yeah, that's great for racing, but it's also not great in the sense of there's no differences between them. There's no advantages and disadvantages between them. There's, you know, one way to do it, which is the best way, and everybody kind of goes to that in that direction by the end of a regulation period. In these situations, you see those differences. You see the you know advantages that Ferrari has right in the beginning. You see that Red Bull is hating this, this formula because they're not getting good starts and they're not getting the top speed. You know, their reliability has gone out the door, and similarly with McLaren, you know, they just haven't been able to get on top of this engine. And realistically, it's more even or even more the stuff that they're having to put around the engine, hence the problems that they had in on Sunday morning's race. But they actually had a pretty decent, I would say, sprint race. Getting back to the topic on hand, um, they were fighting up there. They had a decent, what did they end up fourth and sixth, which is
Yeah.
about where we think these cars are. And that was obviously after Antonelli's 10-second penalty because he ended up getting back up. I think he was ahead of Hamilton on the road technically, but then
Yeah.
he got backed up behind Norris and him. But it really has been playing out that these cars are, they are where they're at right now. If Formula One decides to make a change, which hopefully they do, I want to see something, get updated. I want to see some more power coming out of the main engine. I want to see, more boost being allowed or something like that. From the actual ICE, then we'll start to see where these cars stack up. We'll start to see, when they're not so limited by how much the energy or how much these cars can save on energy and how much they can deploy and how much do they have left at the end of a straight and how much they, I think this is started to show that it's just a little bit too much at this point. And granted, it's only been, I guess you could say, 2.5 races because
Yeah.
of the sprint. But what I've seen so far, it's not competitive. These Mercedes are just taking off on everybody, and it's kind of going back to that old way of seeing Max Verstappen win by 30 seconds or Lewis Hamilton win by 45 seconds or something like that. So you know we want to see more
Yeah, but I feel
competitive
like that's
racing.
the case at the beginning of
Yeah.
every reboot, and I would, I definitely agree with you. I'd like to see a little bit more power and a little bit less dependence on how efficiently you deploy your battery, which is kind of, you mentioned Mercedes is better on the straights. It's because they don't have to lift and coast at the end of the straights, and they don't have to, I forget the name of it, the charging that happens when you redirect the power from
Super clipping.
the super clipping. Yeah, they don't really have to do that nearly as much because their battery is more efficient, and because of that, they're getting higher top end speed. So my only issue is they earned the advantage they have,
Hmm.
and I don't think it's fair to them if they then come back. Well, let's just change the rules. We don't like this, and take their advantage away. Everyone had the same opportunities. They just did it better. And like you said, I mean, last time this was Red Bull right out the gate. It was like, well, this is over. And then eventually McLaren passed them. So it's doable. The issue you're going to run into, at least this year, and maybe into next year and beyond that a little bit, is the way that the rules work. Everyone has a cost cap. There's limited budgets. There's all that stuff. Limited time you can develop the car. And right now, it's McLaren that has the least track time, least development allowed. Lower, they get lower cost cap because it's reverse order of finish. Um, so like, it's not easy to catch up when you're also, have less resources to do so because it's not like Mercedes is going to stop developing. So it's going to be hard to catch back up. I just wouldn't want them to artificially, essentially penalize Mercedes for just being better than everyone. Like, to me, that's not right either. I think they've screwed the rules up, but I think you kind of have to live with it for the short term. And once the cars start catching them, start bunching, then you can start saying, okay, this isn't really advantaging anyone. If you recall, the last, not the last iteration, but the one before that, the one that ended with them stealing Hamilton's championship. Coming into that year, they changed a bunch of the rules, even though it was just for 1 year, to take away a lot of Mercedes' advantage, which is why the cars were so close. To me, that's crap. Like, I feel like if the other team developed a better car, that's tough shit. One thing I would like to see though is, and I was going to talk about. Actually, we'll talk about this later. There are some other things I would like to see happen though that I think will allow teams to catch up on merit. Because right now, like you said, Mercedes is in a league of their own, and the only real racing we're seeing is because Ferrari can jump them at the start. It's like the inevitability of how long it's going to take them to eventually get around. Once they get around, they're able to pull away pretty easily. So that's the only like competitive stuff, that and the Ferraris fighting with each other, which was really entertaining to me. But because you see really two really good drivers not run into each other. I will say one thing for this is more to do with the aero, where you're more talking about the power delivery and how totally agree with they screwed it up and they put too much dependency on the battery. But one thing with the aero on these cars, you can really follow close, much more so than you used to be able to, which I think is why we're seeing these Ferraris essentially dance right around each other and not hate each other. I don't know if you were watching the Sky Sports or the F1 TV coverage because there's different commentators, but I've just been watching the F1 TV. It's the one that comes up on my feed, and I don't really care. But when Leclerc was trying to pass Hamilton, both Leclerc and Julian Palmer just freaked out because they thought he was going to run into the back of him, because you used to not be able to follow like that. If you got that close, you'd essentially get sucked in like a vortex. But no, he was able to follow him, and they were talking about, yeah, I was sure he was going to run to the back of him, but in this car design, you can actually follow closer. So I think they got some of it right, some of it wrong. The problem is with the field spread. It's just like there's not a lot of good racing going on. But I think when it bunches up, these cars do appear to allow you to follow a little bit better, and that's better for racing.
Well, what I actually like it, and I was, I have the tendency of enjoying watching the F1 or I've been watching since the Apple TV broadcast came on, to answer your question. I had that on, but then I also had the F1 um schematics, like that
Oh
on
yeah,
the
you get
second
all that
screen.
stuff is in your package. Yeah,
Exactly. So I had
yeah,
that on one screen, and I had the other
nice.
screen was the actual race. So like I had the track map on, or I had the analytics
Oh
on, or
man, you
whatever
went
it was.
full ass in.
Yeah, if I'm able to watch it at the house and put it on the screens on the computer, that's how I have it set up. And
Nice.
I've done that for a while now, because you were able to open up a second screen with F1 TV app and do that
Yep.
anyways. But um what I what I also like to do is I also like to watch the race in 30 minutes that F1 TV provides, the next day, or the day before we have our show, just so I can kind of get a reminder of it, and I can get a caught back up, because we have to remember this race was at 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, granted, the sprint race was at 10 or 11 or 12 o'clock at night. Technically it was Friday night, so now we're on Monday. So again, I like to watch the highlights, watch all that stuff. But one thing that you see with this generation of cars, they're lively. They're out there. They're spinning the rear tires. They're
Yeah.
locking up the brakes. They're a lot more nimble. They're not as planted as the previous generation, which is fun to watch. It's there was a point in the actual race, that you saw both. I think it was like in the second or third lap, the two V carbs passing each other with Hajar right behind them, or somebody right behind them, and they're like, one's locking one tire, the other one's got loose, the other V carb got loose. Lawson, was struggling to get traction as they were going. Was right after the hairpin after the long straight of 13. And then the commentators like, oh, is he gonna have enough power to put it down? So I think the cars are a win. I think the actual aerodynamics, the fact that they're a little smaller, the fact that the active aero, I think all that stuff is a win. I think where the problem is in the power unit. I think the power unit part of it is where the issue is 1,000%. Um, I was just looking it up. These cars run about 4.8 bar of pressure on the turbos. Man, up that to 5.5 or 6, and you're talking like an extra 250 horsepower, 150 horsepower out of the ICE, and that would fix so many of these problems. But the actual cars though, I think are great. I think the racing is
Yeah.
good. I think that they're able to follow closer. I think the cars, like we said, are more lively. I think one way that we can really tell that is look at how Lewis has been driving with these cars. Lewis loves a lively car. He loves a car that is you know more playful, more light feeling. That's why he was so good on the with those Mercedes in the not the previous generation, but the one before that was because they were so nimble and they were so front dependent and they had that instability in the rear that he could rotate the car around and same thing with Max. Max loved that aspect of it. I think Max doesn't like the other aspect of it, which is what I'm talking about. But he likes the fact, or Lewis seems to like this formula a little bit better than the previous one because the previous cars they were essentially slot cars. They were on rails. They you know how many times there was only a couple times we really saw spins in Formula One in the past, what, 5 years. The one I can think of just offhand was either Antonelli spinning in Monza on his test day when before he got into Formula One. And then was it Lawson or somebody spun at Suzuka? Or no, Colapinto or somebody spun at Suzuka last year, but it was because his DRS didn't close.
Right. Yeah. I think it was called a Pinto. I think.
Yeah, so it's like you had to have a major malfunction like a DRS not closing for a car to spin out. We saw 3 cars spin out this past weekend.
Yeah, but part of that still has to do with I feel like the power delivery because they got to manage
Yeah,
like when you're braking, it charges the battery. There's all this extra that they have to do in terms of managing their throttle input that they
yeah.
didn't have to before. And I think part of that then, yeah, it's a lot more complicated than to get through these. Yeah, like you said, they're losing it. So yeah, no, it's definitely so far it's pretty entertaining. I think, yeah. Well, let me ask you this though, because Ferrari, their drivers appear happy. Obviously, the Mercedes drivers are happy. The one complaining, shout out to Carly, is the person who is used to being at the front of the grid, whose car sucks. Uh, to me, it's a little bit convenient that all the people complain are like, "Man, this car blows." Like this is not a good design. Like from a theoretical standpoint, also happens to just coincidentally align with the cars that are underperforming. To me, it's so hard to get a gauge on it because obviously, like Mercedes doesn't want to change a damn thing, right? They're like, we love this, and Ferrari too. Like you said, they're racy. They're up there near the front. I think they can close the gap. They're also a works team, so they can work through the engine, like and close that gap that way too. Um, McLaren's kind of been a little bit mixed, and then yeah, the ones complaining like are Red Bull because they're clearly I think the fourth team. Although obviously the McLarens didn't really make the grid in this race, but I think on pace, pretty clearly Red Bull's the fourth team. They're used to being at the front, and a lot of the complaints are coming out of that as well.
Well, here's the other thing that we have to remember about this whole situation. The past 2 years, these cars have first of all, these cars aren't in a vacuum. They didn't start working on them the day that the season ended, and that was the only development time, and that's it. They've been working on these cars probably for what 2 3 seasons already. You would think,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
right? Who has been the team that has had, or what 2 teams have been the most dominant teams in the past 2 years?
It's McLaren and Red Bull.
McLaren and Red Bull. Who gets the least amount of time allocated to CFD and to wind
Yep.
tunnel because of that?
Yeah, it's those two. Yeah.
McLaren and Red Bull. So not only do you have 2 works teams, the 2 teams that are building the majority of the engines for for the grid, but they were also third and fourth in the constructors championship. Or Ferrari was second,
But
right?
I think that was
2 years ago.
only last. I think what was it
It was
last year?
two. No, I think it was 2 years ago that they were second. Last year, I think that they were third. I think Red Bull became, or Red Bull was,
Whatever it was, yeah. McLaren
but
definitely has had less Hamilton.
either way, McLaren has had less time. Red Bull has had less time because they have, they've been either first or second or been up there for a while now. On
Yeah, but
top of the
they're
fact that,
also
on
the
top of the
other
fact that
problem
they
Red Bull
lost,
has. Yeah, go
on
ahead.
top of the
Sorry.
fact that they lost, one of the greatest designers of Formula One cars, notwithstanding what he's dealing with right now, in Aston Martin, but
Going
at
down with
least
that
the
shit, Bob.
at least the structure that he brought for that team for 20 years or 15 years, however long he was with that team, he brought a structure and a process that made cars dominant for a long time in that team. Now, obviously, he's struggling right now with Aston Martin, but I still have faith that they're going to get there eventually.
Well, the other
Um,
thing that's happened is obviously like Christian Horner too was, you
yeah,
know, I know he rubs pretty much everyone the wrong way, but like you said, structure and stability. The other thing is, look, they're running their own power units, which are
yeah,
crap. And we saw, Renault couldn't build a proper engine. Alpine finally was like, we're just going to use Mercedes engines, and they're taking a leap forward because of that. Red Bull's on this journey with Ford to try and like build their own engines, and you know, these are very complicated machines.
yeah.
And it doesn't look like they got their engine right, and they're kind of stuck with it. So I mean that's a huge factor as well. Like that when they were purchasing Renault engines and then Honda engines and then just took over the Honda to keep their last generation going. This is building, but Honda had already built that engine. Like it was really just iterating on it. This is starting from over with a completely new engine spec, and they don't know how to build engines, like really build engines. So it's just it's a big mess over there. So anyway, though, so Russell handled the sprint race after again the Ferraris jumped. Hamilton gave him a big fight, but just couldn't really eventually those Mercedes, like you said, stretch their legs and kind of there's more pace in that car, especially on the straights. So that was the sprint race. And then, well, I guess we should talk a little bit about the qualifying for the actual race because it did determine a lot of what happened in the race. But so we get to Q3, and yeah, Russell pulls out of the pits, starts circling the track, and just engine gave up on him. At one point, I was like, he's not going to be. They're going to flag the session and and get him out of there, and then he's got to start 10th. But he was able to limp back to the pits. But what were you thinking at that point? Because it felt like, okay, that opens the door for someone else, maybe.
I mean, I was thinking that he was going to end up, being in 10th, and then that was going to open up the door. Antonelli had looked strong all weekend. I kind of thought that this was going to be his opportunity to kind of shine, and even though he ended up in fifth place during the sprint, he was, like we said, third on the road, and that was after a bad start in the sprint race because he had fallen back during the sprint race. Remember, he got in that incident that caused that 10-second penalty. He was damaged throughout a good portion of it, and I just thought that he looked really strong throughout the weekend. Practice as well, he looked pretty strong. But Russell is, I guess, still their number one, or still viewed as their number one. So it once he kind of had that issue during Q3, I kind of was thinking to myself, okay, this kind of opens up the door. Let's see what happens with Antonelli. Let's let him, rip. Let's see if he can now take this opportunity and run with it. And he did. I mean, the lap that he pulled in Q3 was astonishing. It was probably one of the top 5 laps I've seen from a young driver like that in a long time. You don't see drivers, go out there and and have that type of qualifying that he had, you know, without the confidence that this kid shows. And at 19 years old, that's insane. You know, we're used to seeing the Bortoletos, the Hajars, them come out and look good, look solid, but he looked dominant and he looked confident, and that's something that's good. I'm happy for him. I thought the most interesting thing about qualifying was Toto at the very end of it saying, "Oh, we have three Mercedes drivers, one, two, and three. We I didn't know we had three Mercedes drivers. Oh yeah, I forgot one's wearing red because it ended up being Antonelli, Russell, and Hamilton, and then because they showed all three of them up on the podium with each other.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Ferrari would dispute some of that, but yeah. And so, like you said, Russell actually was able to get going and get out there, and Antonio just beat him anyway. Um, so then we get to all right. So I took a little nap. This is the race for 3 in the morning. Set my alarm for 2:50. I did wake up and I'm like, turn this on, and I just see that them talking about how the McLarens didn't make the grid. I'm just like, I just turned this off. Oh man, not a good day for our boys, Evan. So what were you thinking when both of them? I guess Piastri got out to the grid, but then couldn't actually take the start. They wheeled him back to the pits, and then they were trying to start from there, but that didn't happen. You can see them all the way at the bottom. 4 cars though did not start, as you can see. That was a big number. But yeah, what were you thinking when our boys they're just like, oh, these can't, you're not gonna race.
Well, I had a similar situation, funny enough, because you know me, we talk about this all the time. I have a schedule that's pretty late at night. Um,
Yep.
we usually close at 2 a.m. or we close at 2 a.m. on Saturday nights. So I was expecting close at 2 a.m. Come home. By the time I get home, is going to be probably 3 right when the race starts. I'll probably watch a little bit
Yeah.
on my phone on the way home. But I actually got the opportunity Saturday night. Thank you to some of my other managers that I have there, where I was able to leave a little bit early. It was day number 5 out of 6 in a row, so they kind of gave me that opportunity to take off. So shout out to Lou and shout out to Zach for that. A couple of my other managers. Um, and so I got home. I was home by 12:30, 12:45. I laid down in the bed and I looked over at my wife. She woke up once I got home. I said, "Hey, I'm gonna stay up because I got the race to watch in a few hours." And she, gave me the okay, no problem, whatever. So, anyways, I get up. I go to watch the race. I hadn't been watching anything on my phone about it. I hadn't got any updates about it. I didn't see anything. I turn on the race, get all my telemetry set up and everything like I was talking about, and then I get a text message from Morgan saying what's going on with the McLarens, and I'm like, what are you what? So I look at the screen and I see Lando's not out there, and I'm like, what is going on? Like my boy is not out on the track after he had a pretty decent qualifying. I thought he
Yeah.
looked pretty good, and then you hear, okay, Piastri might be coming out too. I'm like, what? First of all, both cars are having an electrical issue. Now, is it papaya rules? We don't know. It could be, possibly,
It's
maybe.
not papaya
No,
roll.
it's not papaya.
It's
They,
not a
they,
competitive
yeah.
car. They don't care this year. It's
Hey,
not a situation. They're not playing God with the championship this year like they did last year.
Lando can't start. We can't let you start, Piastri. I'm sorry. It's not going to be fair.
Well, let me ask you a
Uh,
question. Do you buy that it's because like obviously after the race, they came out and said they were different electrical issues. They both had electrical issues, but they weren't the same one. Do you buy that?
um, British cars have always had electrical issues.
Fair enough.
That ask anybody who owned an old MG or an old Mini how great the electrical systems were, even an old Jaguar.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, it's so hard to say that you got to remember that's one of the parts that they actually have to make. Is
No,
the
that's
electrical
true. That's a
system
good point.
in the car. Yeah, they get the engine from the from Mercedes, but basically they send them a PU, an ICE, and all the connections are there, and they got to go, okay, now we got to make every wire that goes into it that connects to every single sensor and every single monitor and every single you know everything with everything within these cars. You got these things aren't just an engine and brakes and fluids and turbo. No, these things are basically supercomputers on the road. They have more processing power by a tenfold than the spaceship that got us to the moon. Probably by 100-fold than the spaceship that got humans to the moon. So we're talking about electrical systems that are extremely complicated, and obviously there's some type of gremlins going on in there, so much as to where the team that created this engine and is doing the best in this formula so far, they were still having issues, all the way up into qualifying. What was it, Russell? They ended up giving him a new steering wheel and resetting the computer, and that's what did it for him. I don't know if they were able to do something like that for McLaren, but obviously they weren't able to figure it out quick enough. And you know, it sucks to see that they've fallen this far in the beginning of the season. Does it make me kind of hopeful maybe in the next couple seasons that they'll come back? Maybe, because we all remember, the beginning of the last regulation, how fantastic those McLarens were. These ones seem to be similar in the same way that they're just having issues that are kind of holding them back just a little bit. Um, on pace. They're just not quite quick enough. But we gotta figure out these little gremlins. Hopefully they can show a little bit more going into Japan in a couple weeks, and maybe this little break after the first couple weeks of the season will help them refocus on what they can do to make these cars just that much faster to be able to be a little bit more competitive.
Yeah, no, I'm just not entirely sure it was not the same issue, and they detected something like, and they saw that Piastri wasn't going to be able to finish anyway. Because to me, they got him to the grid and they pulled him off because he had a different electrical issue than the one that Norris had. Even though how to get to the grid, then to me it was,
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't know. The car had been relatively reliable up to that point too,
At least
as
he
much
made
as
it to
any
the
of these
grid this
women.
time.
Yeah, he did. So maybe next race get a lap in here for Oscar maybe. Yeah, he has not started a race yet this year, so that's pretty horrible. But anyway, so yeah, so you can see the finishing order here, but I guess the big kind of event in the after again the Ferrari's got a great start because the Ferrari's always get a great start was the safety car did shuffle the front of the order a little bit because both Mercedes and well, a couple of things happened. Mercedes and Ferrari both double stacked, so it pulled them a little bit out of sequence. The lead drivers were able to come out in front, but the second drivers, which was Leclerc and Russell, ended up behind a couple of cars that did not pit, and so there was a little bit of a buffer there, which created kind of an interesting dynamic at the restart. Do you think? I guess we know the answer is no, they shouldn't have, but that either of these teams should have split strategies there, or you think it's just a no-brainer to pit?
No, I think it was just a no-brainer to pit. I mean, we talked about it in Australia, how it was such a bad decision that Ferrari didn't pit at all. I think if they would have split it this time, you had done a couple different things, then that would have just turned into, well, they gave this guy preferential treatment, or they put him on the right strategy, and whichever one it would have ended up being. I think that the smart play was just to double stack them. You knew that Mercedes was going to be compromised doing it as well, because of the fact that there was going to be so many cars that went in. And you know what? You ended up exactly where you thought you were going to end up, which is third and fourth. I think that Ferrari understands that they're not quite as quick as Mercedes is. They're just that little bit off, but just that little bit is 25 seconds at the end of the race. You're talking. This was what a 56 lap race. You're talking they're a half second, just under a half a second slower each lap, every single lap of the race. It doesn't seem like a lot. It doesn't seem like it's much that they have to gain, but that adds up to being 25 seconds at the end of the entirety of the race. And I think that's about where they're at. And, same thing with McLaren. I wish that they would have been able to go out there because I think that they would have been, competitive with those Ferraris towards the end of the race. Um, and they definitely would have been up there racing against the likes of the Hadjar, the Berman, the Gasly's, and they would have been able to
Yeah,
get
no, I
great
think
cars
they
going.
definitely would have been in between, at worst, in between the Ferraris and the Haas and fifth. Like, I think,
It, it's
and,
in, it's interesting though
and
because we always talk about the best of the rest. Like this year, it's kind of hard to think that there's only two teams, and then there's the best of the rest. At this
I actually
point,
disagree with that a little bit.
really,
Again, despite the reliability, I think the McLaren is significantly better than. I think there's a clear. I think there's a clear one. It's the Mercedes. There's a clear two
yeah,
is the Ferrari. I think there's a clear three right now, which is the McLaren. And then it's the Reds, because like Red Bull is not even faster than Racing Bull. It looks like on pace, so they got all sorts of problems going on there. But I think, to your point, it's been those top four teams than everyone else.
yeah,
I think there's now a one that's clear, a two that's clear, a three that's clear. I think McLaren's pretty clearly ahead of that midfield pack, but they're clearly behind the Ferrari as far as I can tell so far. I mean, it's, if Piastri could actually do some laps, we have a better gauge on it. But right now, I mean, we're just going off of Norris's pace, and I mean, you saw in the sprint race too, right? I feel like they were better than kind of that midfield pack. But here's what I would say though. I think it might have been worth a gamble to just leave Leclerc out. And try to control. You could do one of two things. You can hold up Antonelli and Russell for a bit because, again, they have a better, they're better off the start, so you wouldn't really worry about losing the place at the restart. But the other thing is something else could have happened where, I mean, again, it was a safety car, so very unlikely where, he could have somehow benefited from something and ended up back in front towards the end of the race just by being out of sequence. But the other thing is because the McLarens weren't there, I mean, he was going to finish fourth anyway. Like,
yeah,
if you think about the pit stop delta, he finished 30 seconds ahead of Behrman. And they were actually talking about this on the broadcast, right? Well, technically, Ferrari has a free pit stop if they want to take it.
yeah,
So I think there was very little risk because the McLarens weren't there. The Hamilton and Leclerc both put up a great fight against Russell, held him up, really made him earn it, and then he got in front of them and he pulled away by 20 seconds. And
yeah,
I think realistically, on the pace of those cars, the best you could hope for was third and fourth. And the worst that would have happened if one of them had stayed out is fourth.
yeah,
So I think that's the only argument. If the McLarens were still running, no, you're not put them both in double stack because you're going to give away places. Because the McLarens were able to at least stay within a pit stop of them. But yeah, no, there's a big gulf there. I guess kind of the story of the race, rather than obviously Antonelli, it's one of those things where he was so brilliant, other than that one lockup towards the end, I think with 3 laps left, that he was basically not on camera. You're just watching his time gaps expand. They were showing the other ones fighting behind him. But other than that, like, I think, what do you think of that Ferrari battle? Like you said, Lewis looks like he's kind of reinvigorated, and yeah, this is probably the first time in these two, he's a year and a half, year and some change at Ferrari that he's fought Leclerc and won. Like
yeah,
straight up just was better.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that he's comfortable, more comfortable in these cars, obviously, than he was in the last generation. It seems like the car's more lively, which he likes. He's always talked about liking a more lively car like that. So, I thought he looked great. I thought he looked great at the beginning of the race. It seemed to me, it almost seems like when these cars are able to use that overtake button, that's when the Mercedes start to stretch their legs. Because I don't know if it's something about the Ferraris using the overtake button that it takes away more energy from the battery, and that causes the Mercedes to be able to then have more for this. I don't know what it is it's playing out, but it seems like the first 2 laps, the first 2-3 laps right before they are able to start using the overtake button, and then right as they're starting to use the overtake button, that's when the best racing is happening. That's when these guys are going back and forth, and they're close enough. They're able to fight. They're able to have those battles that we love seeing. But then it's like, as soon as they get that little bit of a distance, that's when the Mercedes start checking out. It's like, okay, the like you said, they didn't even have Antonelli on a lot of the broadcasts. So I think it's great that Lewis is able to be more comfortable in this generation of car. I think that the sport is always good when he's good. Um, you know, and especially in that car, in a Ferrari, to have a driver of his caliber, be comfortable and be able to fight and be able to have that that urge inside of him to go out there and put the car where it needs to be, and battle with, even with Leclerc or with Lando. He was having a pretty good battle right in the beginning of the sprint race. There was the first couple laps with them, they were going at it for a little while. I thought it's good to see that he's, again, like I said, reinvigorated and able to go out there and do these things. It's one of those things. It's like we saw for so many years Alonso go out there and just battle hard with people and go back and forth, and just have these epic races that we look back at fondly. But then you see him nowadays in this Aston, and it's just like, okay, what am I going to complain about today? I'm the grumpy old man that's just going to complain about somebody doing something out here on the track. And you don't like to see that. You want to see them have that aggression still in there, that fight still in them. And yeah, that's what I think Hamilton has shown, and it paid off for him this week. He got his first actual podium as Ferrari driver, not including a sprint race, but in a regular Grand Prix. And I think that he really did deserve it.
Yeah, no, um, excuse me, for sure. And I think to the earlier, first of all, shout out to your father, Jeff. To the earlier point you were making about, from what I understand, and again, I'm not necessarily authority on this, is that the reason that Mercedes is able to, over the course of the lap be that much quicker is just it's the actual battery harvesting. So it's not, if you look at, it's not in the deploy. It's just much more efficient charging in the braking zones, and that's why they don't have to do the super clipping nearly as much, so they can be faster in the straights as well. But it's so they're having to do a lot less battery management, because when some of it's battery management, right? When you lift on the straight, lift and coast, when you get the super clipping, which is kind of automatically deploying power to the battery instead of the wheels, you know, that that part is kind of managed by the driver a little bit, but some of it just kicks in automatically. The thing that Mercedes has a huge advantage is their battery charges so efficiently. And again, I haven't actually seen this analysis yet for this race, but in Australia, they were showing how little it actually had to superclip, because the battery would charge so much in the braking zone to get to the straight and go, it wouldn't trigger having to actually redirect the power to the battery. So, I think it has a lot to do with just their cars are more efficient, and that pays off in more power being used by the ICE, and more battery to deploy when they need it, versus other cars are having to charge up at that point. But yeah, I thought Hamilton was great. He managed well. It was very mature of him too, because obviously they were both fighting with Russell, and then Leclerc got past Hamilton. They kind of traded the at the time it was second, back and forth a few times. Then Russell came in when Hamilton was third and passed him. And you saw Hamilton kind of drop back a little bit and just, I'm going to bide my time. I'm going to conserve these tires. Again, conserve the battery, do all that stuff. And for several laps, because then Russell, of course, passed Leclerc. A much faster car. And then there was that point where Hamilton had more car left than Leclerc, because he conserved it, and he passed him, was able to open up a second and a half, 2 second gap, and kind of just maintain it the rest of the race. To me, that was smart of him because look, they fought the Mercedes as long as they could. I think at that point he realized once Russell passed him, he's like, "There's no way I'm gonna like get in front of him and stay in front of him. So let me hang back a little bit, conserve my battery, conserve my tires, make sure that I have a stronger car at the end while Leclerc is fighting him." And that's kind of what happened. And yeah, once it passed him, it was clearly he was quicker in the qualifying, and he was quicker in the race. And yeah, it's good to see, like you said, after kind of I think checked out might be a little bit too strong of a word, but certainly did not have the I'm looking at the logo you just said.
Yeah, I wanted to
Anyway,
show I wanted to show that when we get to the news section, because there
yeah,
is there besides the race, there is some news that has happened in the past week for Formula One.
yeah, and that was one of the topics I wanted to address. This is obviously a parody account you sent me, with funny nonetheless. But yeah, okay, so let's get a little bit more back towards the race then. So and kind of run through some of our normal topics here. Who's your driver of the day?
You gotta go Antonelli. I mean, I was gonna almost say Hajar because he did have that spin on the opening lap and then fought his way back up. I thought that was really impressive. The fact that he was able to fight his way through that midfield and get back into the points. Ended up being eighth place. He was not just dead last after what was a lap one or lap two, but on top of being dead last, he was a good chunk away. Like even after the pits, he still had some making up to do to get back within the VSC range or the safety car range, with everybody. He was a big distance away from everybody even before the restart, or even after the restart of the race. Like they weren't all the way bunched back up, when they restarted. So I think he did a pretty good job overall of making sure that he minimized the damage for the team overall. Obviously with what happened with Max and him not being able to finish the race, but then for him to be able to bounce back after that opening stint and get all the way back up into the points and at least salvage something out of it, still being on the lead lap as well. The first driver or the last driver on the lead lap, I thought that was pretty impressive. But just the historical nature of the fact that Antonelli, got pole, ended up being the was he the youngest pole sitter in Formula One history, and then the second
Yep,
youngest, driver to win a race. I think that's what it ended up
I
being.
believe the second. Yeah, definitely the youngest pole sitter, and yeah, I think the second youngest driver. I
Yeah,
think behind Vettel, if I'm recalling.
exactly. So I think that's historic on itself. We all
Yep.
know what Toto thinks about him. I think we're all starting to see that this is a kid that is or has the ability to fight for championships. Maybe not this year because I think Russ. I think you're right about Russell having this thing down packed. But at least in the future they have somebody who they can look forward to, coming in and stepping in for the foreseeable future, not even just for the next couple of years, but for the foreseeable future. He's going to be somebody who's going to be a big draw in this sport very soon.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, it's hard to look past Antonelli for driver of the day. Like you said, he made basically one mistake, which wasn't even a bad one. To your point on Hajar, like after he spun, which show you again, this is kind of interesting with this new generation of cars. We've kind of gone back a little bit to consequences when you make a mistake because these cars have been so reliable and so like so bulletproof that you don't really see breakdowns.
Yeah.
You see cars crash into each other without issue and all that. And if you saw the condition of his tires after he it's like you can't, like you said, that's why he had to pit and ended up way behind everyone else because like they were gone. He
Yeah.
flat spotted them entirely to the point that it wasn't drivable. And again, this is we've talked a lot about the engines and the cars. Like there's also new tires this year, and I feel like the last generation of tires you wouldn't have seen that flat spotting like that because people on the rare occasion they spun, you didn't really see that have to pay for it in that sense. So
It was
that
so
was
interesting
that.
when it was so interesting when he spun because it was like Berman went off the track to pass him, and then
Right.
as they're saying that in the commentary, they're like, "Oh yeah, Berman's gonna have to give him back the space." Oh okay, yeah, he gave him back the space. Oh my God, how'd your spin? It was
It was such a
hilarious.
bizarre point to spin at. Like you
Yeah,
said, like Behrman gave him plenty of room. It was nothing like that. It wasn't the old okey doke that you see.
uh huh,
Somebody's got, I'm gonna let him through, then immediately try to get on the guy. He
exactly.
didn't do any of that. There was no shenanigans. He just lost it. But like you said, he kept his head about it and drove to an 8th place finish. All right. For the other question we're going to ask, I'm going to put a rule in place this week. You cannot say the McLarens. What is your disappointment of the day?
Come on, I can't say the McLarens. Why not? I'm
Let's
very
come with
disappointed
another
in
one. All
them.
right, we both agree it's the McLarens. Neither of the cars started, but beyond that, anyone else disappoint
I mean, I guess I could say Verstappen, even though we kind of all predicted that something was going to happen with him. You know, to a certain point, we all didn't think that he was going to have the greatest week. I want to say this: I'm disappointed in Verstappen in the sense of when he's winning, he's the happiest, funniest guy on the grid. When he's not, he's the biggest whiner on the grid. And he has been complaining a lot about these cars. I don't think we all are sitting here saying that these cars are perfect, but he's been the he's been the squeakiest wheel in this Formula One machine so far this year. Whether it's gonna cause change, whether he's gonna get oiled, as they like to say, we don't know yet. But that's my disappointment. Is he has been, complaining so much about this generation of car and how underperforming he is. I wonder if he was leading, the field by 25 seconds and other drivers were complaining about it. What was the famous quote that what was it Christian Horner made, or was it Toto that made it? Just build a faster car.
Yeah.
Was it Horner that said that quote?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was Warner. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe Verstappen just needs to go tell his whatever, not race coordinator, his team principal to just make him a faster car. Instead of sitting there complaining about it the entire time, because you're a world champion, you're widely considered the fastest driver and the best driver, in the world right now. you know, Regardless of what your team is doing this year in particular, you're still considered probably the fastest driver in the world. You know, you don't need to be showing out this much and complaining this much about this generation of car. Just try to go out there and do the best you can and show why it is that you are the best driver in the world.
Yeah, no, he's definitely a candidate for disappointment, not just like you said, because he's off the pace before he retired, but just his overall, it's almost throwing a temper tantrum.
Yeah,
Um, when he's been in the fastest car or one of them for his entire career and been in cars that were built around his driving style.
yeah,
Like, how many teammates has he cycled through? Because, like, he's no doubt he's a fantastic driver, one of the best ever. But he's a peculiar driver in terms of how he handles the car and what works for him. And Red Bull has catered to that. And this generation of cars is the first time he's actually had to kind of learn to drive something he's not comfortable with. Because even when they weren't the fastest, they were still built around him
yeah.
and what he likes to do. And so he was always comfortable in the car, and now he's not. And so that's an issue. I'm gonna throw one out there just to give another option. I would agree with you overall. That means the McLaren's obviously, but then Max and I will say Ocon.
Okay.
Um, his teammates up there in 5th, and he was already not doing well. And then what an idiotic, if you want to call it, attempted overtake. It was more of a dive bomb from nowhere. That like he's supposed to be, the senior driver on the team. He's been there for a long time. He was a Mercedes junior driver, then Racing Point, and then well, I guess it was Force India, then Racing Point he was at.
Yeah.
than Alpine, obviously, and now like you need better from that. Clearly, the car has some pace in it. If you see where Behrman's putting it, like there's really no excuse for any of that, and it was almost like he got past coming out of the pits and was just like, I'm going for it. And yeah, for a veteran driver to do that, kind of expect better. I mean, there's only one rookie in the field this year. It's Lindblad, but you expect a veteran driver to do better than that. That was pretty disappointing that he's getting beat by Beerman and then can't even competently drive around without hitting people. Is no good at all.
Yeah, and I can agree with you on that. There is that conglomerate of drivers, whether it be Gasly or Sainz or Albon or Ocon, that are all kind of in that no man's land of they're good drivers or maybe they're not great drivers. Uh, they're definitely better than the Strolls. The I think Colapinto is starting to have shades of not being one of the top drivers, but I think Bierman is the exact opposite. I think Bierman is that next level of driver that's going to be brought up to Ferrari. When either Hamilton decides to hang it up or when Leclerc decides to go to a different team because maybe Hamilton wants to stay a couple more years. I think Bierman's gonna be that guy that is gonna be the future as Antonelli is in Mercedes in Ferrari, and realistically for the past 2 years, I think he's been a better driver than Ocon. I think he's been more aggressive. He's been very good in qualifying. So I don't even think that we can sit here and say Ocon is the number one driver for Haas anymore. I think Bierman, has shown that he is that number one driver, and Ocon is really showing why it is that Alpine chose Gasly over him, because Alpine was a dumpster fire last year, but right now they're not looking too bad, and
No.
Gasly is driving the hell out of that car, and he's looking really good in doing that, being up to sixth place this week. I mean, granted, we all know that's probably 3 places too high for him, considering the cars that ended up being out, by the end of the race. But to take advantage of that and to go out there and to be competitive, with Bierman in with a car that is in the Haas that has that Ferrari engine that's running, as well as it is. I'm getting back on the Gasly is a decent driver train. Again, he's in that tier of, like I said, the Ocons, the Signs, the you know Bortoleto, I think, is even in that grouping there, because I think Bortoleto's got some quality to him that he's gonna be, somebody who's fighting up there in the future at the sharp end. So yeah, I agree with you on definitely the disappointment on Ocon. This was one of those weeks that we're sitting here saying this now. What's gonna happen in a couple years when there's some rookie that's coming through, the Ferrari juniors? Are they gonna, they could realistically just get rid of Ocon, and he could have his final season in the next couple seasons.
Yeah, I mean he's definitely gotta gotta get it together. Yeah. Oh, shout out to whole family jumping in here. I mean,
Hmm.
just real quick on that, as we're shouting people out, shout out to Science getting in the points with that basically school bus he's driving around the track
Yeah,
there. So
pretty much.
good job. Albon, of course, didn't start, so Science was left to carry it for Williams. I'm sure they were surprised they were able to score points. All right, standings. I'm going to get into the news. So Russell 4 points up. The sprint race obviously helped that as well. Leclerc and Hamilton third and fourth. Then right now it's still Bierman in fifth, Norris in sixth, and then Gasly's ahead of Verstappen, which I'm sure he's enjoying after two previous run-ins. Very early in the season, though, in terms of teams, Mercedes already building a little bit of a gap. Ferrari, then with an even larger gap back to McLaren, and yeah, from there, McLaren has had basically one race finish, and then the sprint points. So, and they're still hanging in third. It's
It's incredible.
pretty impressive. All right, before we fully go into news, here's the meme you sent me, and then yeah, we have some news about some races that aren't happening.
But just to
But
preface this, the Formula
yes.
One has actually been talking about changing their logos.
Yeah, but not to this.
So,
This is obviously a troll. It's from an account called F1 Troll, but yeah, if you can't tell, the one in the Formula One is a battery that is very depleted. Is the joke. And the caption says we asked for V12, they gave us a 12 volt. So
I love
that's
it.
pretty damn clever. Pretty damn clever.
I love it.
All right, Evan, as you alluded to earlier, there's a lot of news, and the biggest news, I guess, is so obviously there's a week off this week, and they race in Japan, and then after that, the next two races were in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. Those two races are not going forward. They said postponed, not officially canceled, I guess, but postponed at this point. But not going forward. Obviously, conflict in the Middle East, not a safe area to be in right now. What are your thoughts there? How much of an impact will this have on things?
I mean, I think it's going to impact in the sense of we're great tracks and great races and it's really disappointing that this is happening at this point. We're obviously a Formula One show, not a political show, but when stuff like this is happening around the world, it's gonna affect a lot more than just the countries and the people and everything like that. It affects everything that's happening in that region, in that area. And Formula One is a sport that travels all around the world, and there's always been situations like this that happens. And this is just another one of those situations that it's disappointing to see that we're losing these races, but it's smart that they're making this decision, um, especially being that you know that a lot of these teams have backers or owners that are from the Middle East and from those areas. You know, our favorite team for one, has
Yeah.
the group that owns them is from the Middle East, and that's one of those some of those races that they love to go to show off in front of their owners and be able to go out there and schmooze with them. Um, Again, don't want to get into the politics of it, but it sucks. It sucks that any of this is going on right now. So I think it's smart for them to make this decision. I think it's good for them to come out with the decision, already, not to wait on it, not to say, hey, maybe we can hold out a little bit just in case. And, no, it was smart of them to make this decision. I think that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think they really had much of a choice. None of that of the world is safe right now. Last thing they want to do is see a Formula One, car get bombed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of logistical things they have to do too to get the equipment over there, and again, the seas over there are also not a safe place to be. So I think it was definitely the right decision. I will say it's very odd. We talked about how intense jammed the calendar is now. Be interesting to see how these teams adjust on actually having essentially a break in the middle of the season, because normally they have obviously in August where it's a forced break, like you can't work on the car and you have to go away. This is not that. But they're having a similar amount of time with two races being deleted from the calendar. So one of the things I would love for Formula One to do, which they're not going to do, is to say, hey, after Japan, you got a month or whatever. It's roughly a month to you can do whatever the hell you want development wise. The calendar's open. If you want to spend money, spend it. Win tunnel time, test time, put cameras in. Though everything has to be open to the public, so that way fans at least get something.
Yeah.
Obviously, it'll have to be in a different place. It can't be in the Middle East, but and allow these allow for track days and allow them to develop these cars a little bit because, I mean, and Mercedes will obviously have that opportunity too. So I don't even know if the gap will close, but to me, the reliability issues, like no one wants to see like 4 cars not start. And
Yeah.
so like using this opportunity to give them, hey, do you have track time, wind tunnel time, whatever you need to develop your car, provided that any kind of track time is videoed so that they can stream it out over F1 TV or whatever, and that way, fans get a benefit from it, and other teams can frankly copy whatever you're doing if they want to. So, and kind of make it a free for all for a month between Japan and actually the next race after Japan will now be Miami, believe it or not. So,
Wow.
and just allow for some more rapid development, so we don't end up with the processional. Well, this is how it's going to be this year, and you kind of have to wait till they're not going to do any of that. But I'd like them to kind of open up a little bit the development window now, given that there's a month off that was unexpected.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like something that would be a great idea. Allow them to kind of go at it for a little while. So, who knows? They might allow them to tweak the car to work on the car. I'm sure these guys aren't going to stay stagnant. They're not going to lock up the cars at Parc Ferme, during those 2 weeks. I don't think that they're going to make them do that, but whether they're going to show everybody what they're doing, that's the question. That was a great idea by you, but it's how these teams are. These teams are Fort Knox on wheels. So, but
yeah, and it's also it's monetary. Like as much as there are Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren will whine about the cost cap. These teams don't actually spend the money either.
Yeah.
It's a money-making venture now. Formula One did not used to be a money-making venture. It used to be a prestige venture where these major companies would lose money on it.
Yeah.
And the goal of winning, and that's why the team's failing every year and all this stuff. And it's become very much a corporation that makes a profit. And so the cost cap plays into that too. Like, we're not going to let you spend money. If you spend money, then we have to spend money. Then everyone else has to spend money. Then we all lose money. So we're just going to restrict everything. So that is intentional, and I think that would be a barrier to doing anything. But be nice if they did something in this month gap. But I don't. I think it's just going to be downtime. It looks like.
Looks like.
All right. Any other news you want to get to before we wrap up here?
No, I think we covered it all. Those are the main things. It is going to be an interesting week coming up. I think Japan's going to be a fun race, and we'll get to talk about that next week. Suzuka's always fun to watch, and hopefully there'll be a Honda car that'll be competitive.
You're gonna go down with that Adrian Newey, Austin Martin is gonna get it right ship, huh?
Listen, Adrian Newey can do no wrong in my book.
I think he did wrong in Austin Martin's book, but anyway.
Well,
that car is terrible.
Listen, McLaren was bad in the first year too. Remember that. McLaren.
Yeah.
That car was just as bad as this Aston Martin is.
Sure thing, man. Sure thing. Let's see how
they can turn it around.
Let's see if we'll see if Honda exits the sport again because of this disaster.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Anyway, yeah. So that Japan race is not next week. That's why we're not previewing it today. It is the following weekend, so March 26th. Technically, that Thursday at 10:30 is the first session. One of these days, we will have a normal. Actually, we'll have a very normal race time because after Japan in a month, they'll be here. So that time zone will be a lot friendlier for the two of us. But
yes,
yeah, we got the overnight. It's not quite as bad as China, but yeah, still kind of around midnight crowding for those sessions. But that's in a couple of weeks. Yeah, it should be interesting. We'll see. This is the first week off they've had since the start of the season. So I'll see if anyone can bring something else or a little bit more reliability or something to bear here. But yeah, we'll be back next week to preview that race. Evan, thanks as always for joining me, and Thanks to the entire Stones extended family in the chat. Appreciate all of you.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.